everybody. In this talk I will be talking about service disruption in software-defined networking when we update the network. This work has been done under supervision of my advisor Dr. Tom Laporta, my co-advisor Dr. Tinke, and Dr. Bartoloni and Dr. Khanfoush, and I would like to thank them for their help. In traditional IP networks, the control and data planes are tightly coupled, embedded in the same networking devices, and the whole structure is highly decentralized. However, traditional networks are complex to manage and control. SDN refers to a network architecture where the forwarding state in the data plane is managed by a remote control plane decoupled from the data plane. So we have a single centralized control plane that controls several forwarding devices. The technological driver behind the network update is the idea of software-defined networking, which I will not go so much in detail here, but the only idea that we need to take away here is that some central control are supposed to update the forwarding rules. So why do we need to update the network state? There are several reasons that we might want to update the forwarding rules to change the network state. Sometimes new flows arrive into the system and we need to recompute the routing to admit the new flows. Sometimes we have a new policy. For example, we might want to put a firewall or direct the traffic to a specific part of the network for security reasons. And sometimes network topology changes and we might also have some sort of failures. Also, the end-to-end traffic requirement of the flows might also change in the system. So the general concept is that we have some sort of old network state which may be in some sort of chaos or might be on some sort of chaos if we don't do something, and then we want to change to a new network state. And the way that we change the new network state is to send out updates and the switches change their behavior. So what are the challenges that we are facing during network update, and what properties would we like to have? The problem of network update can be addressed in several ways. One of the aspects of the problem is that we want to avoid the congestion during and after the update, or at least minimizing the congestion experienced by the applications. Second aspect of the problem is to maintain consistency of routing and avoid policy violation. For that, we might have different levels of consistency. For example, one might want to have per packet consistency, which means that each packet either follows the old rules or the new rules and not a combination of both. Or we might want to have a per flow consistency, which guarantees that all packets in the same flow will follow the same rule version. Also, we want to have a small update time, and also we want to satisfy all demand pairs. And if it is not possible, we would like to maximize the number of satisfied demands. So why do we have the straggler switches? This can be due to several reasons. Some switches may be overloaded, and they may have different number of rules to be installed. We might have a heterogeneous architecture where some of the switches are old and slow. So the figure that I am showing you on the left is from our simulation experiments, and we use the Bell Canada topology that I will explain later, where we have 10 existing flows in the system and each demand pair has a flow rate of 3. We have 10 new demand pairs that we want to admit in the system. We then measured the number of updates on each switch and plotted the probability distribution function of the update time among all switches. It is observed that half of the switches have very small update time while very few switches have higher update time. For the synchronous update approach, the slowest bottleneck switch severely increases the disruption time. And significant variation in rule update times are also reported in other papers. It is shown in another paper that even if we send the same number of updates to the switches, sometimes some switches take more time to complete the update, and therefore the total update time is dominated by the straggler switch. Control activities performed including reading packets and byte counters, and rules with OpenFlow protocol querying SNMP counters, reading switch information with CLI commands, and running BGP protocol um, is the things which contributes to the update time. We see that despite the fact that update operations are identical, the time to update highly varies, with 99 percentile 10 times larger than the median. Our minimally disruptive update framework is built on the two existing prior work, the two-phase update approach and sequential update approach, that provides consistency with different trade-offs between update time and consistency level. We note that while the update time of the sequential update approach is lower than the two-phase update approach, it does not provide as a strong consistency level as the two-phase update approach. The first graph on the left shows flow installation time on a 24-port Brocade ICX 6610 commercial SDN switch. As shown, when we increase the number of rules to install on the switch from 10 to 100, the rule installation time increases linearly from 5.2 seconds to 51.3 seconds. Now suppose that the controller sends an update to 4 SDN switches in parallel, each with a different number of rules to be installed. The dominant update time is the switch which takes the most time to install the scheduled update, which is switch number 2 in this example. The second figure on the right shows an example of asynchronous update. In an asynchronous update approach, each flow gets an update independent of other flows. Assuming the same per rule update time on all of the switches, the disruption time for all flows is the same, which is equal to 1 in our example. In the simple network that I'm showing you on the left, suppose that we want to change the original route from the upper link to the lower link. We can first install the rules on switch 6, then switch 5, then switch 3, and finally when we update switch 1, the flow will experience a disruption. The mean touch problem is hard to solve optimally and efficiently. Therefore, in this section, we propose two randomly rounding algorithms that each aim at solving the problem from a different perspective. Both algorithms are applicable to both versions of mean touch problem. The algorithm first solves the LP relaxation of the mean touch problem, whose objective value will be lower than the optimal. The LP relaxation of the problem gives a fractional solution indicating the fraction of flow edge routed on each link. We then convert this solution into a set of routing paths for each flow and the fraction of flow routed on each path. So I will not go into the detail of the conversion, but then using this approach, we have a bound on how much congestion we can have. So the theorem of RR congestion approximation bound says that under RR congestion, the probability of violating the link capacity constraint for each link by a factor of 1 plus 5 log E is no more than 1 over E2. RR demand first solves the LP relaxation of the problem with an additional constraint that each fractional link solution can only route 1 over log E fraction of each flow. This solution is then converted into a set of routing paths for each flow as explained before. We then randomly choose a path P with that probability and round 1 over 6 log E fraction of the flow edge over the path if the bottleneck capacity P is at least equal to the amount of flow which is supposed to go over that path. Otherwise, we drop that flow. After trying to route 1 over 6 log E of the demand per flow, if the chosen path for flow H has any spare capacity, we increase the flow rate for this flow and then update the residual capacity until there is no more spare residual capacity of the flow. So the next theorem says that RR demand approximation bound, which says that under RR demand, the probability of violating the link capacity constraint for each link is not more than 1 over E square. So this experiment shows that while the number of disrupted flows in RR congestion and RR demand are close to the optimal, they have either a higher congestion factor or less satisfied demand. And one of the differences that we observed between the two approaches was that one of them can satisfy all of the demands and the other one has some congestion. We next evaluate the impact of quality of service constraint on the average number of hops. We use the Kaida topology with 20 demand pairs where the flow rate of each demand pair is set to 3 and each link's capacity is chosen randomly in the interval between 20 and 50. We first find the minimum number of hops to route each flow using shortest path routing and increase the quality of service deviation from the shortest path from 10% to 60%. And the figure shows the experimental result for this scenario for both synchronous and asynchronous update approach. As you can see, by relaxing the quality of service constraint, the total number of hops increases, while the straggler's update time decreases. Therefore, by changing the quality of service threshold, we can configure our choice of trade-off between having shorter paths and lower disruption. For future work, we plan to work on finding an update order that provides consistency with minimum congestion during the update transition. Right now, we have looked at the route update problem and used two prior work that provides consistency. However, we didn't give any solution on how to schedule the updates when we have multiple flows in the network. Prior works which address this problem usually consider the update schedule of a single flow and they don't consider the conflict of the flows. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation.